What's up, basement dwellers? Welcome to another edition of Podern. I am your host, Chris, the Dace Man Dace, and joining me as always, Cheever.
What up, guys? How you guys doing today?
I hope they're doing well because we're going to be talking about Loki Season 2, Episode 5, Science/Fiction. Written by Eric Martin and directed by Justin Benson and Aaron Moorhead, all three who had cameos in this episode. Dropped November 2nd. And the thing at least the thing I was worried about when it came to this second half of the last two episodes, they kind of rushed into one episode where basically Loki has to get the band back together. So I'm just going to ask it right out the gate. What were your initial thoughts on episode 5?
So I got really excited when I saw the title as Science/Fiction, because to me, that is a Rocky Horror Picture Show thing. It's the opening song to Rocky Horror. So
Double
I was,
feature.
So I was kind of getting excited, like maybe it would be some kind of, more questions at the end than anything else. But going into the episode, I was kind of let down a little.
Yeah, it did the thing that I was nervous about at the end of our last Podern of like, okay, the gang separated. He's got to go round them back up. Thankfully, they did it all in one episode. So we'll just jump right into it. We find out all the characters we've come to love: Mobius, Hunter B-15, Casey, and OB, which branch timeline they came from, and who they were in their real life. So we're going to start with the most fascinating one, I think, of the bunch is Casey, who is based on a real life person who escaped from Alcatraz. He's Frank Morris, one of the three men that left Alcatraz and disappeared, presumed drowned or possibly escaped. But that's who Casey is. How did you feel about them tying in yet another historical event like they did with D.B. Cooper?
Well, to be honest, I didn't recognize that.
I recognized
prison.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I saw the prison break, and I was just like, "Oh, okay, prison break." Then you kind of hear the foghorn. You're like, "Oh, they're on." I thought they were all going to be on the super raft. But then it was Alcatraz. I was like, "Oh, okay." I thought it was kind of cool, even with that little bit of an Easter egg that it's a play on real life events.
Well, I think it's the only reason I picked up on it is because I've been watching the Lawrence Fishburne thing on the History Channel, like History's Greatest Mysteries or something like that. And they did a thing on D.B. Cooper after I had saw the Loki episode about D.B. Cooper, and they've done a lot the thing on the Alcatraz escape. So when they were pulling from it, it's like, oh, it's interesting that they do these little hat tips that, like, this in the Marvel Cinematic Universe explains these historical mysteries, which I think is cool. Didn't expect Casey to be a theft or a thief. Frank Morris went to jail for like several bank crimes, I think. I'd be more professional if I had more research on Frank Morris, but I didn't. Eugene Cordero playing that role and how Casey is in the TVA, it just shocked me that he was a hardened criminal in his branch timeline just to be kind of a bitch who does grunt work in the TVA.
Well, it's kind of ironic in a sense, right? It's even more ironic considering that the most powerful gems in the entire universe is sitting in his desk in episode 1.
Yeah,
can't even steal it.
Did he steal those? Like he has those in his desk, and maybe he's supposed to like catalog them, but did he keep them as like I'm just going to steal certain things around the office because nobody understands? Like that's his fix. Yeah. Because if you think about it, Mobius is addicted to jet skis even in the TVA. So maybe the stealing the little trinkets was Casey's little hat tip to, I just had the urge. Jumping to Mobius, we finally figure out his thing, which is kind of honestly to me was a little sad.
Yeah.
Because he's a single dad of 2 boys, one evil, one good. which kind of is reminiscent of like the Thor and Loki vibes. Except
Mhm.
I would not call Mobius / Don fucking Odin. But the interesting thing I found of Mobius is that if we assume this branch timeline still went through the whole Thanos arc, that means Don survived the blip because he was in 2022 when they pulled him out. I
I
thought
didn't
that was
recognize
interesting.
that. Yeah.
Well, you kind of watch the dates. So, like, obviously, Casey's is kind of irrelevant because since they picked him from history and just said, all right,
Yeah.
we're just going to use historical event. I don't know if there's significance to OB's date, but Willis, who is Hunter B-15, is 2012, which is the attack on New York.
Mhm.
And Mobius Dawn is 2022, which would be the final year before Endgame, before they actually resolve the issues of the blip. So I thought those two being in there were kind of interesting in a way. So how did you feel? Like we both agree that Don's story is kind of sad, and he
Yeah.
plays into it a bit too towards the end of the episode when like his initial reaction is like I gotta go save my kids, which makes his like outlash at Brad when they were interrogating him make so much more sense because maybe he deep down realizes he left behind people. Maybe not necessarily knowing that he left behind kids, but left behind something.
Yeah.
Willis, who is Hunter B-15, is a doctor in New York in 2012, which either is before or after the attacks. And I believe, and I'll hat tip new rock stars here, Willis is a character from the comics that's in the Loki storylines. And eventually,
Really?
yeah, Veretti Willis is a like Loki's partner when he's out on his own. I think it's like the agent of Loki timeline or comic run, and she kind of helps Loki get to instead of being the god of mischief, he's the god of storytelling, which will play into this episode a bit. Again, hat tip new rock stars because I wouldn't have picked that up. I did not read Loki's individual run. How'd you feel about her being a doctor?
To be honest, like a lot of the characters just felt flat to me.
Well, like with
Like
her,
she was caring. She wrote the like "Don't climb on trees" on the cast, but all in all, I was just again just it's 5 minutes of the 30-45 minutes that we got
mhm.
that did nothing for the story or for the character development.
Well, the weird thing with her, at least her arc, is Hunter B-15 knows the timeline she came from because Sylvie does show her where she was ripped out of in like season 1 when they're outside the Roxxon Walmart or whatever the hell it's called.
Yeah.
So, and she got really upset about it. So, I'm very curious as to why she would be like, maybe she's just upset because, like, oh, I had a life and now I don't have it anymore. But given what they showed us in this episode, she didn't have the attachment that Mobius had to 2 kids per se
Yeah.
to have that kind of super reaction of sadness. Granted, again, you were ripped from your life, so you're probably sad in general. But I guess to your point, it fell flat. I wanted more for her backstory.
Yeah.
And then last is OB, who is AD.
I'm glad you caught that. I was excited for that.
And he's a writer of science fiction, which it makes sense. He wrote the TVA guide, but that fell kind of flat too.
See, this is where I'm going to disagree a little.
Why is that?
So I honestly think AD he
Mm-hmm.
might play a more sinister role.
So you jumping on the Kang variant theory?
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Well, it makes sense, right? So OB again wrote the TVA handbook,
Mm-hmm.
inspired by Victor Timely. In which case, AD then gets the handbook, and if it has Victor Timely in it, it kind of like keeps circling itself back.
Yeah. And he created a makeshift temp pad in 19 months. That's fucking impressive, regardless of, like, I think his timeline was 94. So they didn't have, like, Stark technology in 94.
Yeah.
So that means he had to make that from scratch with whatever's around his
missile silo.
Yeah, that looks exactly like his office in the TVA.
That made me question Obi a little bit more too. Like, why does his real life almost mirror the TVA?
Yeah, especially if they all had their quote unquote had their minds wiped. So the whole episode, again, I think you alluded to this before we hit the record button, that this is going to be a very short podcast because it was we have to run around and regroup post-traumatic event in episode 4. There's you get a glimpse into their lives. They're pretty average lives for the most part. You have a doctor, a jet ski salesman, a writer slash was he a physics doctor, a criminal. They're pretty much just an everyday people in a way. But the interesting one is Sylvie. So Sylvie knows this shit happened because she still says the temp pad, which makes me think that as the explosion was happening in episode 4, she temp pad the fuck out of there and didn't actually stay there and watch. How do you think Sylvie's still aware of what happened?
So I feel that Sylvie may have stayed and watched everything, but because she is somehow a part of the Loki spectrum, that she wasn't affected.
You have a lot of hope for her.
I do. I want her to be good.
I feel like she's still Loki pre-events of Thor 2, where like he started turning a bit. Yeah. I think she stood there enough for that final like camera swing to get back to our Loki, and then bailed. Because even in this episode, you get the sense of she just does not care what happens to these timelines. Especially since the way she shrugs off the McDonald's gone. Like, that to me is kind of, I mean, I forget things all the time, but to have your meal that you just paid for disappear off the truck that you just sat on to unlock the truck, she clearly has just either given up or does not give a shit.
I mean, that would also make sense with the record store, right? If she knew this was happening, or like she knew something was about to happen.
And I'll hat tip New Rockstars again. When she's having the drink with Loki, she's staring right at like where Loki's shot would be, and then they cut back to Loki going for the shot, and it's gone. So for her to be naive or oblivious, it does her a disservice as a character if she truly just didn't catch this shit. And I think it makes her a little bit darker if she does see it happening and just does not care. She doesn't care until basically everything is unraveling around her.
So then, do you think that her lack of care will bring back Kang? Her willful ignorance?
I think so. Basically thinking that she got away with what she did. She got to live in her branch timeline. I think up until the moment, to the end of this episode, which, if you think about it, any progression any of these characters made in this episode didn't matter, except for Loki.
Which is why it's the biggest waste of an episode.
Yeah, it's rough. It'll probably make more sense when we watch the finale, but even then,
you have too much hope for this episode.
Well, it gives Loki a new power, so they had to somehow redo the moment that the shit hits the fan. I don't know how else they would have got back to that moment or progressed after wiping out quote unquote time.
They could have had Loki just constantly reliving those last 5 seconds or 5 minutes over and over again.
But I thought it was an
with
interesting.
the eventually saving everyone
Well,
by going further back.
they kind of did it with him starting to time slip again.
Yeah.
And then just drug it out for 40 minutes to like, oh, I can control it. Which you kind of wish he would have got to that sooner. If
Or
not
you could have
bring
done
it back
episode 2 of the second season.
Mm-hmm.
Like
The
just
fact
so
that they
it makes the whole Victor Timely side complete. Like if they don't have something important with Victor Timely in the final episode,
Mhm.
almost half of the episodes were just wasted this season.
Do you think Victor's still alive? Because he at least gets back to that. We're jumping ahead a bit, but he gets back to the moment where Victor's walking down the steps. So do you think Loki's back in time enough to stop Victor from going through the doors?
Yeah, they have to. They have
Okay.
to change to do something a little different. That or he'll just go back even further,
Mm-hmm.
and he'll probably be able to stop Miss Minutes from her crushing habit.
I guess that makes sense. It would like so other things that happened in this episode. OB has a board filled with post-it notes. Again, hat tip to New Rockstar. They broke it down and started going through every post-it note. After watching it, I don't think they mean shit. I've been burned before on WandaVision of trying to go too far down the rabbit hole.
Well, it's a writer's trick.
Yeah, I really think it might. If anything, it's just a nice little hat tip to what they did in the writers' room.
Yeah.
Maybe for this specific episode. I don't think it has any relevance. I don't think anything from this episode will have relevance except for Loki's new ability to time slip backwards. I'm also curious if the time slipping goes away again, or because they fixed him essentially in the first episode,
Mm-hmm.
and then it came back. So I hope they give a better explanation as to why he's the only one that time slips. And it happened to him twice, and more so than just it's a plot device because we had to get back to this moment.
Yeah,
I hope it's not that. I hope there's better meaning to it, or I hope there's more to it.
Yeah, all we can do at this point is speculate and just hope for the best.
So don't get me wrong, because if you've been following us on this podcast on our journey here with Loki season 2, we have been fucking fanatical over the first 4 episodes, and now we're here at the penultimate episode going, yeah, I'm getting those WandaVision vibes again.
Yeah,
I don't have those at all. I think episode 6 is going to be amazing. We've talked about the fact that 6 debuts the night that the Marvels debut in theaters.
I still need to buy my tickets.
Yeah, I might be stretching again because I stretched with Spider-Man: No Way Home, and Hawkeye.
Mm-hmm.
Even with that final shot of Spider-Man: No Way Home, him going through Rockefeller Plaza during Christmas, it's like, come on, Hawkeye was literally there. I really have a lot of hope. I'm super excited for the finale, even though it might not sound it. I think we're going to look back at this season and go, yeah, 5 was cool, but you could have got away with just be like, oh, he still time slips and he figured it out.
So I have one important question to ask.
Sure.
Before the final episode hits.
Yes.
Do you think someone out there, or do you have any interest in a mega cut of all of Loki season 1 and season 2 that just takes all the fluff out and have as a 3.5 hour movie?
No. I'm not gonna. Again, it sounds like I'm bashing this series, but I really enjoyed 1 and 2, and I enjoyed it on the way that they deliver it weekly episodes, and I would say every episode except for this one we're covering tonight left you on the edge of your seat, like what's going to happen next? I feel like at the end of this episode, I'm exactly where I was a week before with 4. It's like, okay, we're back at the same spot. What are we going to do to solve this? I don't know if I could go through season 1 again. I did before we started doing the podcast to kind of refresh myself.
Oh, yeah.
And you said to take out the fluff. I feel like you'd eliminate most of season 1.
Not necessarily.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of character building in season 1. And since I know the characters, I don't care anymore. That's the roughest part of like a movie when you go back and rewatch is when they have to like sit there and drill home the character building part, which episode or season 1 has to build Mobius, build Sylvie, make you care about B-15, leading to He Who Remains, and then you have a bunch of other Lokis in there, which was a cool like hat tip to the multiverse. But season 2, I would probably watch as a maybe season 1 episode, the finale, and then season 2 as a supercut. I'd watch.
Okay.
Because I would say 1 through 5 of season 1 is just nonstop character building. With like maybe 20 minutes of actual plot moving. Because you start season 1 and you think there's an alternative Loki that's the big bad. You end season 1 and that none of that really mattered. It was Kang is the big bad. And Sylvie becomes the partner. So like there's key moments you need there for that, but knowing that character build, I don't feel like I need to watch season 1 again. But I do think a supercut of season 2 would be pretty cool.
Okay.
Because I don't think with the exception of this episode, there had like I always wanted more when those credits hit in this season. Season 5 is like, yeah, I want more, but like it's this or episode 5 is like, I want more, but this is the same feeling I had at episode 4. I don't feel somewhat satisfied. Like, okay, that was awesome. Like, I can't wait for next week. It was more like, oh, okay, so all right, I can't wait till next week, but this felt like a waste. I don't know, maybe I'm just being overcritical.
No, I mean, I felt the same way. I mean, I kept watching the episode going, if it ends here, I'm going to be pissed. Like, if it ends this way, I'm going to be pissed. Like, every 5 minutes, I would go, if it ends now, I'm just like, what's the point?
I will say I'm super grateful that they tied it up in 1 episode. If they had drugged this out over both of them, and then you got like a rushed 15, like the She-Hulk ending, where all of a sudden it was just like, all right, we're going to rush to the finish. That shit drove me nuts. So I feel like, yeah, episode 5 was just kind of like I think a really good, again, character building. Because Mobius, Hunter B-15, Casey, and OB, they had an alternative life. Here's the alternative life, because we probably should show you that. Like, why do these people have a stake in the game? Type thing. And potentially could set up like, where do these people fall after the dust settles? Because I honestly can't picture any of them going back into their life, having the knowledge they had of the TVA, and then to go back into, well, in Casey's case, drown or potentially just hide for the rest of his life. It doesn't make much sense, but it does make sense to see why you would. It makes you care about them more, and I get that as a storytelling thing. A lot of other shows would have handled this as like, let's pepper in Don's backstory throughout the 5 episodes. Let's pepper in Willis's story. This said, we're just going to do it in 1 episode and make you wait an extra week for the finale, which sucks as a guy who's on his edge of his seat every week waiting to grab something. But, probably would have been more annoying spread out through 5 episodes. Actually, I could foresee us, if we were doing this podcast and they spread it out, we would probably bitch every episode about the backstory. Like, you spent 30 minutes on the good part and then 15 minutes on this bullshit story that Don's a jet ski salesman. So, anyway, before we roll into the finale, any big predictions? Still going to stick with the cameos that we selected past couple episodes?
I don't know, man. Like, we know where it's going to end. Like, that's the thing. We know where it ends.
Mm-hmm.
The question is, who do we see along the way, and how does Loki break free of the TVA.
And ultimately fix this major cataclysm that's about to happen.
Yeah.
Because
And then how do you explain that? Like, how do you explain that to Thor? How do you explain that to Nick Fury? How do you explain that to, like, in the MCU? I mean, at the end of
it's simple.
not Infinity War, but Endgame, Hulk just smashes into the fucking Doctor Strange house, and he goes, "Thanos is coming." Like, you can't do that with Loki because no one knows he's alive.
Yeah, so first they're going to be shocked that this dead man just showed up, and technically not the dead man you saw die. So you got to explain that. Like, hey,
I'm still a very big fan of the theory that when Loki watched his true version of himself, he relived all of those feelings and emotions and the growth.
Well, I mean, that was a quick way around it, but technically you're talking to 2012 Loki, who didn't get the 7 years in between full experience. Like, if it wasn't shown on that reel, he doesn't know about it.
I think he saw everything.
I
think he sat in the TVA and watched 7 years of his life.
I don't think he knows Korg, and that's going to be a major plot hole when he sees Korg and Meek.
No, he's going to know who Korg is.
I do think it'll be the simple solution, and the joke I was going to make is he just hands them a TVA guide, because that seems to be the like, oh, this will make you understand everything.
That will be the cheapest way to start the new wave.
That's how they've explained. Sorry, that's how they've explained everything. Victor Timely, hey, we're from the future, but this book will explain it. Oh, I'm in. AD after like, hey, your real name's Obi, and here's the TVA guide that you wrote. Oh, now it makes sense. Nobody stopped and went, what the fuck are you talking about?
Yeah.
Cameo wise, I think I'm still sticking with the ones that we were talking about that are probable. Thor seems like the obvious one because the interviews and stuff like that. Doctor Strange would make sense. Anyone in the Marvel's crew, just because of that movie coinciding. I don't know if that was meant to happen. I don't. I just think it's a coincidence.
Only one way to find out.
Got to go see both.
Yep.
The Marvels was supposed to be out in July, and they kicked it to November. I don't think they knew that, unless they went back and filmed something in Loki and said, "Okay, we can make this work." The ending's gonna be tricky. I'm interested just for the sake of like, it's very hard to predict what's gonna happen because he went back just far enough to watch it explode again. He didn't go back, we'll say, an hour or 2 hours to kind of like, all right, look, I was in the future. What we were doing didn't work. Let's think of another plan. He's walking out there to execute plan A, and I've got 5 seconds to save his life, and then it's going to explode anyway.
Well, how do we know? So refresh my memory. How do we know that was Victor Timely walking on the platform and not Mobius?
Oh. Well played, sir. I didn't think of that. The only thing I could say is, again, I'll cheat and just say new rock stars, put the clips side by side, and they looked very similar. Did not think about going back and looking at episode 1 to see if like they did the same shot with OB and then just put Loki in it. Damn, that was a really good point. Do you think it's that?
It has to be.
So you think he went back and basically null and voided the entire season?
Yes.
I don't know how I feel about that. It makes more sense. Like, it makes way more sense than going back 5 seconds before shit hit the fan.
Yeah. I remember the whole point was to save the TVA, and TVA goes to shit when he first appears in season 2.
Yeah.
And that's when he was time slipping.
So, but that makes a interesting.
So this episode is going to start with a bang, and it's just going to keep going off.
So do you think he goes back to that moment in episode 1? Mm-hmm. Does he stay there?
No, he alters the future.
Okay, so
He slowly becomes he who remains at that point, right?
my brain's gonna explode. They're breaking their own time rules from Endgame.
Yeah. Well, remember the TVA is outside the realm of time and space, so
Yeah, so he's creating a branch outside of the realm of time and space. Like,
yeah.
although if you could argue he's just been doing that nonstop all season because he time slips multiple times,
Mm-hmm.
and it's in various points of this episode. The only thing
pruning himself is again interfering with like that is like a branch timeline that's not on the timeline.
Yeah, so he'd have to prune himself again to reconcile. See, the only thing I don't like is if he goes back to that moment and he stays in that moment, and we say we prune the one that got saved in episode 1.
Yeah.
You don't. Victor Timely doesn't matter. Well, he does matter, but
he can go back and grab Victor Timely before anything happens.
Well, Renslayer
would or a scanner.
Renslayer would get her fingers into him deeper, per se, because there's no point to go after Victor if Loki came back and solved it himself. Because we'll just assume that he comes back to episode 1, right?
Mm-hmm.
He solves whatever the loom issue. That means Renslayer is going unchecked in 1893. Her and Miss Minutes.
Yeah.
So at that point, after he fixes the loom, do they walk through a time pad? And now Victor Timely is, in fact, Kang the Conqueror, not Victor Timely anymore? Not that weird nerd? Because now Renslayer's had time to catch him up to speed, get him rock and rolling. Like, nope, that's yours. Go conquer. And then he walks through as he who remains. Oh, God. Now I'm back in. 100%.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
And I can't wait for it to get here. But also, I feel like we're going to be disappointed no matter what happens.
Yeah. I'm going in with low expectations, so this way it's like a firework going off every time.
Well, that's how I approached every series after WandaVision, and I haven't hated anything since. Wow. I'm going to leave it at that. I feel like that's a thinking moment for people to end on, and we'll be back after the finale. And I assume we're going to do maybe either as a Podern Nerd or we'll put it under something else. I'd probably put it under Podern Nerd just for the fact that like we haven't been doing movie reviews that much. We haven't been going to the movies.
Life hit.
Yeah. So we're not going to launch another podcast just to have one episode sit there. So we'll probably do a Loki finale review and the Marvels review. So you're going to get 2 Podern Nerds next week on top of other Podern Nerds we might be filming. So Podern Nerd's going to be cranking out some episodes, man.
Yes, sir. I got a question. Not to derail you.
No,
I do have a question. What are your thoughts on doing a Let's Play, me, you, and 2 other people with Mario Wonder?
I would be down.
All right.
So we'll just throw this out there. I know this is Podern Nerd, but Basement Protocol Productions has been churning the wheel. Podern Nerd's the easiest one to pump out because we all watch TV and we all have thoughts. But we're actually trying to get more content out there in other categories, food, gaming, other reviews. So, and comedy. We're trying to write skits and stuff like that. But I would be down for that. Keep your eye out because, again, Podern Nerd will be dropping the finale next week of Loki Season 2. We'll be dropping the Marvels review. I assume you and I will be doing that again if you get a chance to go see it. And then technically on the slate too, we have Invincible, we have Monarch, and we are going to try to tackle Goosebumps. So busy week.
Yes, sir. I am looking forward to all that we have.
Yeah.
It'll be a good time.
Absolutely. So that's going to do us here on Podern Nerd. If you have any theories before the finale drops, just let us know. You could comment on our YouTube videos, or I think you could comment on Spotify now. fucking magic works. Yeah, it's crazy. But that's going to do it for us here. I've been Chris the Dace Man. Dace, he's been Cheever.
What?
And again, we still no ending. So I'm sure you're going to sing off, but I'll just say the Basement Protocol tagline. Remember, Basement Dwellers, stick to the protocol. We're out.
Yeah. Ba-da, ba-da-da, ba-da.